Being a vampire is probably a lot of fun, until one's half vampire, half human offspring catches them and forces them to commit to a regular life. A man arrives in his car in Texas. He covers his vehicle when the sun starts to appear and sleeps inside. Next, we see the interior of a store. The man who arrived is named Francis. He knocks on the door and says he wants to buy something before the store closes. But the clerk ignores him and turns the lights off. He exits from the back and becomes shocked to find Francis there, who instantly tells him what he needs. The clerk refuses to let him in and even pushes Francis. After that, we observe him walking in the store. He takes money out of the register and leaves the clerk's body lying inside. He places a gas container inside his trunk and rides out. An unknown person watches him ride out and starts walking in that direction. Francis soon enters Oklahoma and locates a vacancy. The owner, Hilda, offers him a room for a cheaper price because the water is down. When he enters his room, he covers all the see-through areas with newspapers. Then Hilda hears something outside. She comes out to investigate and witnesses someone running away. She enters the room with water pipes and sees Francis working on them with a wrench. The lady lets him know that he looks like a nice man, but could still be bad. After having worked on the pipes, Francis takes a shower in his room. Later, he hears something outside his door and acts cautiously to discover who it is. He opens it and pulls in a young girl. She starts telling him a lot of information about cars, and he asks her how she found him. The internet is the answer he receives. Next, he asks who she is, and the girl starts explaining a series of events that lead to her being his daughter. Francis says she is mistaken about it, and the girl reveals that her mother lost her life recently. She also states she can go outside during the day, and her name is Jane. Afterward, she meets Hilda, who gets the wrong idea about her and Francis being together. So she starts walking quickly to his room, equipped with a shotgun. Jane attempts to stop her, informing Hilda that he is her father. But Hilda does not stop and opens the door. This prompts Jane to jump on her and choke her to an unconscious state. She tells her father about it, who lies covered in the bathtub. He comes out and discovers Hilda lying in the room. Jane tells him she saw what he did to the clerk. She adds that it explains certain traits she has. Francis tells her the clerk deserved it, and now wants Jane to perform same act on Hilda. So his daughter comes to her, and he tells her to concentrate. Soon enough, the girl grows sharp teeth. Francis tells her to look at Hilda's neck, and she sees the artery there. As she is getting ready to bite, Hilda awakens and stands. She starts screaming, and Jane delivers a forceful strike to her, perhaps eliminating the lady. Later, Jane finds raw meat in the refrigerator and starts eating it with her hands. Francis sees this and instructs her to use a fork. After that, they bury Hilda. The duo stands over the grave, and Jane tells him she would have done it. Then they ride in Francis's car. She asks him where they're going, and Francis says to Idaho, Jane's home state. But she does not want to be taken back, saying she spent weeks finding him. She also doesn't have anyone in Idaho and was going to go into foster care. They continue to slightly argue about what should happen to her. When asked what happens to him in the daylight, Francis says he explodes, and sometimes he resorts to consuming people's blood. Jane asks his age, and the man only tells her that he's old. Eventually, the duo arrives in Kansas. They stop at a place to recharge. While Francis goes inside the store, Jane talks to the man there. He introduces himself as Nathan. When Francis returns, he tells them about a hotel 40 miles back, but Francis just wants to use his garage. He wants to pay Nathan $60 for it, and the man agrees. In the garage, Francis works on his car while he and Jane talk. He asks her what she wants to do, and she mentions having spent time in the hospital with her mom. But that requires school, she states. Her father tells her he was a surgeon. In a short while, he starts sleeping in the car. That is when she opens his trunk to find a box inside. She opens it and discovers very old photos there. As she looks at them, Francis surprises her by standing behind her. Jane wants to know where his family is, and he tells her all of them are gone. He reveals some crucial details from his past, that he became a vampire and wants to take her to Nebraska because she has some family there. That prompts her to ask what he is to her, but the man does not answer. When they arrive in Nebraska, Jane tells him the whole thing was a mistake. He asks her what she wants from him, and she frustratingly says she wants everything. This makes him angry, causing him to show her his teeth and yell that he doesn't have anything to give. He follows that by stopping the car and informing her he can't give her what she thinks she wants. Jane then gets out of the car and decides to walk the rest of the way. Francis, however, wants her to get back inside, but his daughter gets angry, shows her teeth, and runs away. Francis is left with nothing else at that point and turns around to drive back. Following that, we see him waking up in his covered car. There he finds Jane's bag. Meanwhile, Jane comes to a house and knocks on its door. Francis looks through the girl's writings and photos. Jane sits in a house, listening to a lady talk to her. She tells her she has not seen Jane's mother in 25 years. She also asks Jane if she has any money. Subsequently, Francis drives to Minnesota. He visits someone who is an old friend. He shows her a picture of Jane, and she says it's his daughter. They somewhat argue about what needs to be done with Jane. And then we see Jane encountering 3 young males. Soon they sit smoking. She doesn't want to at first, but she ends up doing it. Her different biology allows her to tolerate it well. Afterward, she notices a goat and comes to it. She perceives its arteries and her vampire teeth come out. The boy that offered her a smoke comes to her and tells her she's attractive. He introduces himself as Caleb and shakes her hand. But he does not let go, which makes Jane manifest her teeth again. He comes on to her, and she attacks him. Back at the house, Francis's friend gives him advice to be a father, and he tells her that he was one. She reminds him that when they met, he had lost everything. She also says he has a gift, and what he became is his and now hers too. That makes them a family. In the morning, we see Jane lying in a barn with the 3 boys nearby, covered in their life substance. She then awakens and becomes upset at the sight of what she's done. At around the same time, Francis wakes up under a bed. He comes to Jane's relative's house and asks about her while stating to be her father. At night, she walks on a dirt road and sees her father riding toward her. He exits the car and they look at each other. She cries and they hug. Later, she presents to him what she did. He says he's not mad, but rather impressed. The solution that Francis comes up with is to burn the barn. So they do, and right away. In a diner, Jane wants to know if he tried to avoid people for meals. He says it's doable but affects metabolism. She also asks how they're going to live, and he doesn't know how to answer that since he never did it. After some time, he asks what he should do. His daughter says they need to live somewhere and he needs a job. For that, he needs a birth certificate. They arrive in Colorado. As they ride, he tells her a story involving a man who is about 35 years old now. Since Francis looks about that age, he decides to take his birth certificate. He tells Jane where he is and goes over a plan regarding what they should do. After that, she enters a hospital and asks the receptionist for Roger Fieldner. She states to be his niece and a doctor is brought to greet her. They talk for a little while and the doctor brings Jane to Roger, shutting her in with him. The man sees her and says that she's with him, but she doesn't know what he's talking about. He points to the chair for her to sit and she does. Then he asks what he can do for him and that she was sent to finish something. He also questions where he is, meaning Francis, the whole time. This prompts Jane to stand and start leaving. Roger asks again what he can do, but this time he even refers to Francis as his king. After seeing that he's serious about his offer, she lets him know she wants a copy of his record. The man quickly agrees to it, but he wants a taste of her. With a repelled feeling, Jane puts her finger on his tongue and he becomes satisfied. She leaves with his records and brings them to her father. He is surprised that she got them, but he wants one more thing. At night, Francis comes to the hospital entrance, which is closed. He talks to security about getting in and he gets rejected. Soon, however, Jane comes to help him and they are allowed entrance. He starts talking to Francis and Jane comes behind him and brings him down. Francis goes to collect the security tapes while Jane collects the body. Following that, we see her driving while her father stays protected under covers during daylight hours. This increases their productivity. They go to a pawn shop, and Francis gives the owner his antique wristwatch. He expects $1,000 for it but is only offered $600. This makes him look at the owner oddly. What follows is Francis entering a car repair shop, looking for work. The man there tells him he can work anytime as long as he gets it done. Next, Jane creates an ID for him with a lot of absurd makeup. When September arrives, Jane gets enrolled in a school, and Francis receives a brochure to join a support group for single parents. In October, we see Jane going to school, and in November, Francis continues to work at the car repair shop. At home, Jane approaches her father with some of his collected fallen hair. He tells her that's what happens when he doesn't eat properly. That soon escalates into them arguing about their situation. Later, Francis goes to the support group that he was offered. The group leader calls him Roger. He starts saying Jane's mother was the one that raised her. He did not have a life ready for her when she came. He did not even have one for himself. Francis believes he should put his daughter before himself but is still somewhat selfish. After the session, the group leader comes to him and tells him Jane is a good kid that is adjusting well. She adds that he is doing great. She offers him some advice, that they find something they could do together. Then Francis rides to his daughter, while she sits with a friend. He tells her he located her by fatherly intuition, and now wants her to come with him. At that moment, we see her friend, Terry, is considerably hairy and possibly a werewolf. As father and daughter ride, Francis mentions them going on a field trip together. He also tells her she will lose her life like everyone else, but they will still be together for a long time before that happens. Jane shows him a new jacket she stole for him, which he approves of. Afterward, they arrive near a bar. Francis talks about a particular individual they both see entering it. He wants them to use him in a way that only they can, their bonding activity as recommended. Furthermore, the man is a murderer, says Jane's father. Later, Francis comes to the man. He tells him something is wrong with his bike. When he looks to see the problem, Francis states he fixes bikes and wants to help him with his. So he brings him to the trunk of his car, and Jane scares him when it opens. This causes the man to vomit on her and run away. Subsequently, the duo rides again and Jane cleans herself. She makes a statement about them eating animals instead of people. Francis goes over a small list of the negative side effects that will bring. But Jane thinks he had his time to look good. Maybe he can let himself go now. She adds that she likes his new jacket and asks if she can have his old one. They ride off into the distance, connecting and acquiring hope for their future.